and running. Okay, so here we are. Sorry for the delay for those of you guys who are out in TV land that were waiting for us. Rod, thank you for your faithfulness and standing by for our special annual, Resurrection Sunday service. So we're going to jump right on into it. Ben, open us up in prayer, and then we'll jump right in.
Lord, we're so grateful to be here this evening to just be bathed in your word on this incredible time of year, in this incredible year. We're so looking forward to sharing all of your word important to this coming Resurrection Sunday, to where we are, because it really is, Lord, the date that we hold closest to our hearts, because with Jesus' resurrection on Sunday, we know that his promise has all been fulfilled and will be fulfilled. So it really is the most hopeful day, faith-filled, glorious day in our entire calendar. So thank you, Lord, for Brother Herb's exegesis, and thank you for this opportunity to hear your word and to share it with all of those who are listening this evening and who might be listening at a future date. So Lord, we're just so grateful for your word and your presence. In the name of Jesus, amen.
All right, so just a quick word about last week. We had some issues. The devil's trying to shut down our little internet church services. IBM bought out Ustream, and they tried to cancel our subscription, which they did, and took us off the air for a couple of weeks, but Ustream still has a subdivision. I was able to get in touch with them, and through 8 or 9 days of negotiations, we're back up and running again as of yesterday. So we're back. All right, so that explains why we weren't here. It wasn't that we weren't being faithful. It's that, the corporate powers that be that run the world and that are run by the God of this world tried to shut us down. But the Lord opened the door and got us back up and running after we thought our 6 or 7 years worth of work was all over. So we're going to pick up where we should have been last week. Palm Sunday is this past Sunday. This past Sunday is the day that Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, the triumphal entry. And so Palm Sunday being last Sunday, then today would be 4 days later. So today would be Nisan 14, which would actually be the day of Jesus' crucifixion. So there is no Good Friday in Scripture because you can't get 3 days and 3 nights into Friday crucifixion, no matter how you twist it or subdivide the days. So we know that from Scripture that there had to be 3 days and 3 nights, and we can just take a look real quick at the verse that says that. Matthew 12, verse 40 says that Jesus told the disciples that just as Jonah spent 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the fish, he would spend 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth, meaning that he would be in the grave and in Hades, speaking to the dead after the crucifixion. So there is no Good Friday, even though the world will celebrate Good Friday tomorrow. That's really a Roman Catholic tradition and not a biblical concept. So today at 6 p.m. or 6 a.m. when you woke up this morning or just before you woke up, Jesus would have been arrested and put on trial by Caiaphas, Annas, and then eventually by Pontius Pilate, though Herod would have also had a little mini trial in between that time as well. So between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m., Jesus would be on trial. And in the most paradoxical and oxymoronic decision in the history of the criminal justice system worldwide, after several kangaroo trials, he eventually was acquitted by Pontius Pilate, who was the governor and the controlling authority in the Roman state at the time. And immediately after being acquitted, he was put to death. So he was executed after. So he was executed, and we find out that he was executed after being found not guilty. So that's never happened before. Even in Russia or under the former Soviet Union or dictatorships, what they generally do, they'll have a kangaroo court find you guilty based on trumped up evidence and trumped up charges. But nobody's ever been acquitted and then summarily executed immediately, which is what we see in John chapter 19. So Jesus gets executed on Nisan 14 of 32 AD, which was a Thursday. So today at 9 a.m., Jesus would have been on the cross from 9 a.m. today until 3 p.m. today, whereupon he would be taken down from the cross and hurriedly put into the tomb. Why? Because the Sabbath was going to begin. But you say, Herb, wait, you contradict yourself because you said that Jesus wasn't crucified on a Friday, so the Sabbath couldn't have started if he was crucified on a Thursday. But that's because what Scripture is referring to in John chapter 19 as the Sabbath isn't the regular Saturday Sabbath, but the special Sabbath. And what's the special Sabbath? The special Sabbath is the beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which we find out about in Leviticus chapter 27, I think it is. We'll take a look at that in a little bit. The special Sabbath is something that was mandated by God, and here it is, Leviticus 23, verses 6 and 7. We'll eventually get through all of those, but I'm going to give you a quick overview just to catch us up. That says that, you're going to have this 7-day feast, but it's going to begin with a very special convocation. That special, convocation where you're separated out from the rest of the people is what? It's called the Passover. That's the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And as a result of that, that feast, then you see that there will be 7 days consecutive. The first day being the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the beginning of that whole holy holiday is the Passover. The Passover, just like Christmas, falls on different days. This year, the Passover is on Saturday, which is the actual regular Jewish Sabbath. But next year, it'll be on a Wednesday, I think it is. So it changes. Just like Christmas doesn't fall on the same day of the week every year. It'll be on Friday this year, it'll be on Saturday next year, and it'll be on Sunday the day after that, and Monday the year after that. In 32 AD, it happened to fall, and Sir Robert Anderson, who was a mathematician who worked for Scotland Yard in England, was able to establish conclusively through the looking at the different time charts, star charts, and all of the mathematical computations to determine what day the Passover fell on in 32 AD, and it was on a Friday. So that means that the Thursday would have had to have been the last day for Jesus to have been crucified. So when John chapter 19 says he had to be taken down from the cross because the Passover was about to begin, it's not talking about the Saturday Passover, which is where the Catholic Church, which isn't really all that well schooled in Scripture anyway, they're not really Bible studiers, they're really more tradition of menist. So when it says the Sabbath was about to begin, they're talking about the special Sabbath. The Passover is also known as a special Sabbath, meaning the beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. That particular year, it fell on a Friday, so that Jesus would have been crucified on a Thursday after riding into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, which would have been this past Sunday, the day which is called Palm Sunday because palm fronds were waved and the people hailed him as the Messiah as he rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, fulfilling Old Testament prophecies, the most important of which is the prophecy of Daniel in Daniel chapter 9, verses 24, 5, and 6. It says that the Messiah was going to arrive and be cut off or killed, but not for himself or for his own sins, but for the people. And we find out that Daniel was given a time by Gabriel, who came from God, with a very specific prophecy about the 70 weeks of Israel. We have our chart up here, the 70 weeks prophecy chart. And basically, Daniel was told by Gabriel that after the first 69 of those 70 weeks of years, Messiah will be cut off, killed, but not for himself. And so we find out that these 69 weeks are not weeks of days, but weeks of years, meaning units of 7 years. So 69 weeks times 7 would give you 483. Sir Robert Anderson, again, a mathematician, also a born-again Christian, and the head of Scotland Yard in England in the 1800s, he was able to do the mathematical computation and come up with exactly 173,880 days from the decree of Artaxerxes Longimanus to restore and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, which occurred. And we see that, we can look at Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 5, 6, 7, and 8. And we see that historically we were able to lay that down and find out that that occurred on Nisan 10 of 445 BC. So if you count it forward from Nisan 10, 445 BC, centuries before Jesus was born, if you count it forward in time, you would be able to come up with 69 weeks of years, so 483 years. But if you did it in terms of days, you would get 173,880 days to the day. And guess what? When you count forward from Nisan 10, 445 BC all the way through to Nisan 1032 AD, you get the Palm Sunday where Jesus rides into Jerusalem on a donkey. Now remember, we've talked about this in the past, so this is all review for you guys. People out in internet land probably haven't heard some of this stuff because they don't really talk about it that much in the various churches. But Jesus had to ride in on a specific day. Why? Because the Passover had certain special Levitical Mosaic rules, which we find in Exodus, which we find in Leviticus, saying that the Passover lamb had to be pure and white, without a blemish, no weird colored hairs, had to be snow white, and then he had to be presented to the priest. And, that started out as a tradition in Egypt. When Israel was in its final night of captivity in Egypt after 4 centuries of captivity, God told Moses to tell the people, hey, grab a lamb, bring it into your house on Nisan 10, and let the little lamb play with the kids like a puppy or whatever, like a house pet, from Nisan 10 to Nisan 14. And after 4 days of being with the family, then what would happen? The Passover lamb would be killed by each family. The blood will be collected into a bowl, and it will be placed on the lintels of the door in an interesting shape, in a geometric shape that forms what we would call a cross, or the letter T. Crossbar, here's the lintel, the doorposts of the home, here's the lintel that will be over the door. These are the types of doorways that you had in ancient Egypt when Israel was spending their last night in Egypt before the Exodus. And so, on the 14th of Nisan, they would kill the little lamb, and then they would put blood from the lamb on each side of the doorpost and on the lintel. And if you drew a ruler through it, you'd get the sign of the cross. And they were doing that, not knowing why they were doing it, but God told them to do it, so they did it. What God was doing was laying the foundation for the coming of the Messiah. And so that tradition became a part of Israel's zeitgeist, or Israel's culture, because God said, you're going to do this every year as a memorial. You don't know what you're memorializing. You think it's just leading the captivity of Egypt to the freedom of Canaan, or the land of Israel that God was giving to the people of Israel. But Jesus said, no longer is it going to be just a memorial of your father's departure from the land of Egypt, but this is for you today, the memorial of my death on behalf of you, so that you can pass from the captivity of death to the freedom of life. And Jesus explained all of that in the Upper Room Discourse, which is the Last Supper, but which isn't actually the Passover. So there's also a confusion and contradiction about that. The meal that Jesus had with his disciples, that we see beginning in John chapter 13 and running through John chapter 18, or the end of 17, isn't the Passover. The Passover hadn't come yet. The Passover would be the next night. It was the preparation for Passover. It's like Christmas Eve. So they had the big Christmas Eve dinner. In some Spanish communities, they celebrate Christmas on Christmas Eve. So they have the big, Noche Buena night, and they have the big feast on Christmas Eve. Our family did something similar to that. As kids in Michigan, we go to a certain family member's house each year, have the big Christmas Eve dinner, and then you spend all the time with everyone together. And then that morning, kids in each one of their respective homes, they could open up the presents under the tree in their own little homes on Christmas Day. But you wouldn't have a big Christmas Day dinner. That big dinner would come on Christmas Eve, and then the next day you get home late and you open your presents first in the morning, right? That's how
That's the whole point of it.
Yeah, that's how it works. So it was the same way with the Passover. So what Jesus celebrated with the disciples, the Last Supper, was actually the preparation for the Passover. Because Jesus couldn't eat the Passover, and the reason why he couldn't eat the Passover is because he was the Passover. So we see that Jesus is playing out again, for the final time, the Passover dinner celebration ceremony. And then he's explaining to them that the whole thing was set up so that you could understand that I'm the Messiah, and that I come into the world to be what? The sacrificial lamb whose blood takes away the sins of the world. That's what all of this, all of these different, dynamics in the Old Testament, all of these strange gymnastics are to show that God became a man to die for the sins of men, and that his blood shed for us at Calvary, which we will commemorate on Sunday, Resurrection Sunday. It's not Easter. There's another mistake. The word Easter is in the King James Bible, but that's in the book of Acts, because Peter, who had been arrested, saw that, hey, when he was arrested by Herod Agrippa, I think it was, who killed James, one of the, powerful, influential members of the church, and saw that people were so happy about it, said, hey, let's arrest Peter now and put him in jail. And then after the pagan feast of Ishtar called Easter, we'll kill him too, because we see how happy it made the people to kill James. But God had other plans and sent an angel in and supernaturally got him out of jail free and walked him out of the jail before the Easter pagan fertility goddess ceremony, which was celebrated at the time of Paul, Peter, Jesus, by the Romans and the Greeks and the pagans as the springtime rite known as the Feast of Ishtar, or she was also called Ashtaroth, or Estra, or Easter is the anglicized form of those pagan fertility goddess names. And so the Catholic Church superimposed that paganism on us, and that's why we have a Christmas on December 25th, which is really the Saturnalia feast, where we worship Satan with drunken revelries, feasts, and sexual orgies. And then they superimposed the Feast of Easter, the fertility goddess ceremony, on the resurrection of Jesus Christ and superimposed it on the church to get the church to welcome or accept in paganism. That was Satan's great particular move, or Satan's great plan for the Roman Catholic Church. The church in Rome was really founded by Paul, started, sincere Christian believers, where Paul started converting members of Caesar's household, the Roman centurions, and servants and slaves, and people became followers of Jesus right in the city of Rome, so that Caesar felt so threatened by this spreading new faith that he had Paul eventually put to death. And after Paul was put to death, it didn't, quash out or squash Christianity in the land of Rome or in the Roman Empire. It spread more and more. And so after Paul was done, then Peter came along and took, followed in his footsteps until he got killed by Rome. And then the other disciples did the same. And so for about 3¼ centuries after the crucifixion of Jesus, the Church of Rome grew until Emperor Constantine co-opted the Roman Church by bringing to an end the execution of Christians, throwing them to the lions in the Colosseum, putting them to death. Those things were brought to an end by Emperor Constantine, who says, I saw a sign of a cross. Now, the cross he saw wasn't the plus-shaped cross that, or the letter small t-shaped cross that we associate with Christianity and the crucifixion of Jesus. He saw a different type of cross that was used by the Crusaders. That plus sign cross was an ancient pagan symbol that dates far before Jesus, and that's the sign he saw. And whether he was under satanic deception and thought he was actually serving the God of the Bible, or whether he was just a satanic Luciferian agent intentionally deceiving the people, he was clearly being misled, or he was clearly voicing the plan of Satan to co-opt the Roman Church and turn it into a pagan abomination, which it is today as part of the Roman Catholic Church. We saw on television earlier this week the burning of the Cathedral of Notre Dame, one of the greatest Catholic cathedrals in the world. And that Notre Dame is just, it's Latin for Our Lady. Notre Dame isn't Latin for Jesus is Lord. Notre Dame is Latin for Semiramis, the fertility goddess, who's just celebrated on Easter is our God.
Mhm.
And that's what that temple, that's what Notre Dame is dedicated to. The fertility goddess, who's also known as Easter or Ashtaroth or Ishtar in Egypt. And so to see that burning and see the spire fall down, of course the spire is symbolic of what? We've talked about this before in our Mystery Babylon teaching. It's the phallus of Osiris. It's a phallic symbol. So we saw it burning and falling. And I think it was interesting because, who knows? Is this a sign that God's judgment is about to be unleashed upon the earth and that he's about to strike back at Satan, who has co-opted the name of his son Jesus and the Christian church and turned it into some kind of pagan abomination? I don't know. I think that it was symbolic of something. And I don't think it's happenstance that as we see that we are reaching on the calendar the end of the 70th year of Israel's establishment as a state. And we look at Matthew 24 when Jesus talks about considering, the fig tree and all of the trees and the olive tree and the budding of, these things which are symbolic of Israel. And we see that now we're in the final weeks of the 70th anniversary year of Israel. Some people think that it could be a big prophetic year since 70 is such a big number, as we see here in 70 weeks of Daniel. 70 is such a big number in scriptures. Maybe the 70th anniversary of Israel is the time frame in which the rapture will occur and the church will go home to the Father's house in heaven, the real church. And then the pagan church, the Roman Catholic Church, will be left behind to rise up or help raise up the Antichrist. And so, who knows? Maybe this destruction of the Notre Dame Cathedral, whether it was by accident, happenstance, or some terrorist activity, maybe it's a sign that God has had about enough. We've had tornadoes and earthquakes throughout the land. Matthew 24 said that when you see tornadoes and earthquakes and weather patterns in diverse places, you know that the end is near. When we see wars and rumors of war, we've had that. When you see ethnic unrest between people, we know that we're at the very last of the last time. So all these things are happening now. And so this Palm Sunday that we celebrated last Sunday is really, possibly one of the final Palm Sundays before the rapture of the church to go home to be with Jesus. So this Sunday, not Easter, it's Resurrection Sunday for the church. It's Easter for the pagans, like the Roman Catholic Church. They're pagans, right? Their king, the Pope, is a pagan. And they worship the fertility goddess Ishtar, who is also known as Easter. And so that's why they do it, and it's fine for them to do it because, they've always been part of Babylonian, Neo-Babylonian syncretization of modern world religions with ancient Babylonian paganism. Christianity came along, and Satan used Constantine to declare the edicts of toleration where Christians can't be thrown to the lions anymore. And the Christians in Rome were understandably tricked into thinking this must be a sign from God. Even the emperor has become a follower of Jesus. So when the guy who was about to kill you says, no, I'm not going to kill you or your family. I'm one of you guys now. I'm going to be your great champion. Of course, they wanted to believe that, and they innocently did believe it. And so the emperor of Rome, Caesar, became the Pontifex Maximus, which really means supreme bridge builder. If you look at the Latin, that's what it really means. Pontifex is the bridge builder. Maximus means the greatest of all. The greatest bridge builder between ancient Babylonian paganism and the Church of Jesus Christ in the history of the world was the pontiff or the pope. And that bridge building and that commerce between ancient Babylonian paganism and Christianity continues to this very day. And so Jesus is eventually going to be given the order from his Father, go and get my children, separate the real church from the paganized Babylonian church, which is run by the Luciferians. And so we'll see that the wheat will be separated from the chaff. The chaff and the wheat look very similar to the eye. Jesus gave a parable about that. When you look at the eye, you can't tell the difference. But you can tell because one has fruit and the other doesn't. There's, the germ of the wheat is known as the fruit of the wheat. It's edible, and you eat it, and it can cause, it gives you nutrition, calories, carbohydrates. You can survive on the fruit of the wheat, which is the wheat germ. The tare, on the other hand, doesn't have any fruit. It doesn't have anything edible that provides nutrition. And so what does Jesus say? He says, you gather, on the last day, the gatherers will separate the wheat from the tares, and the wheat will be gathered into the Lord's barn, and the tares will be gathered together and burned with fire. And so we see that time is coming. I think the church is about to be separated from the false church, which is symbolized and epitomized by the Roman Catholic Church, which celebrates their Good Friday tomorrow and celebrates their Easter or fertility goddess day the following Sunday. So we're going to be biblically literate Christians, not refer to the Resurrection Sunday as Easter, because we are not celebrating the resurrection or the fertility of Semiramis or Ishtar or Easter or Estra or any of the various names that she has been known by. Of course, she being none other than Satan dressed in drag, which he is wont to do from time to time, and that's why you see the transgender movement growing so rapidly in the United States and elsewhere, even in Israel. The gay and lesbian transgender movement is moving with like wildfire in the land of Israel. So God soon is going to come in. He's going to judge his own people, but it's not for us to do that. So that's the background. So we'll look real quick at the 70th week of Daniel, or really the 69 weeks of Daniel. 70th week of Daniel won't occur until the tribulation period. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and take a look at that. We'll try to tie all that in together, and I'm going a little rapidly because we lost a week and we lost a little bit of time tonight. But we'll get through it, and we'll be able to hit on some of these things, Lord willing. So let's go ahead and start out then. Daniel, man, the book of Daniel really lays down for us what's going on. So let's go ahead and start Daniel chapter 9, verse 1 and 2. Steve?
In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of the seed of the Medes, which was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years, whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem.
Okay, so that's where we get the 70 years, but not 70, basically we find out that what? That Israel was placed into captivity in Babylon for 70 years. There's that number 70. Again, that's why I'm such a stickler for the idea that 70 years could be very important in God's, economy, and that the rapture might actually occur before the end of the 70th year, which is, May 13th is the last day of the 70th year. May 14th, 1948, will be the beginning of the 71st year. So it'll be the first official day after the 70th year. So the 70th year ends on May 14th of 1948, which is the anniversary of the nation Israel, or the 71st anniversary of the nation Israel. So we have those things that we can look forward to, and we'll see, because in a few weeks we'll know whether or not the rapture occurred on May 13th or not. If not, though, because a generation in the Bible oftentimes is 70 years. And then when you look at Psalm chapter 90, verse 10, it tells us that a generation is 70 years, but if by reason of great strength, it can be extended out to 80 years. So we find out that the general generation in God's eyes is a 70-year period of time, but it could be stretched out, by the Lord for another 10 years, not for another century, not for another, 70 years, but for another 10 years to make it 80 years. If you take that calculus and apply it to 1948, May 14th of 1948, the birthday of the resurrection of the nation Israel, or the fulfillment of the dry bones prophecies of Ezekiel chapter 37, we find out then that 70 years from that would have been 2018. But we pre-tribulation rapture believers know that the rapture has to occur at least 7 years before the second coming of Jesus and the fulfillment of all things and the coming in of righteousness on the earth. So that means the rapture would have had to have occurred by 2011. So when 2011 came and went, and then January 1st, 2012 began, I was really depressed. Not because I was worried about the Baktun prophecies of the Mayans saying that the world was going to end in December 21st of 2012, but because I knew that the rapture didn't occur in 2011, and I had to go through the 2012 without the rapture occurring. So I was hoping the world would have ended on December 21st 2012, though I knew it couldn't because you had to have a 7-year tribulation period in the rapture of the church first. So, when I found out about Psalm chapter 90, verse 10, that says that 70-year generation can be extended out 10 years by the Lord, by reason of great strength, then that extends out 2018 to 2028. In 2028, if you subtract it out, the 7-year tribulation period, which is what? The 70th week of Daniel, then that gives you 2021 as the new terminus point for the church era, the church age, which has lasted as the parentheses between Daniel chapter 9 verse 26 and Daniel chapter 9 verse 27, between the 69 and 70th week. That parentheses may end, if it doesn't by May 14th of this year, then perhaps the 70 comes into play because it was extended out by God in Psalm chapter 90 verse 10 by 10 years to 2028, which means the rapture would have had to have occurred 7 years earlier by 2021. So here we are, halfway through 2019, and so that means we've got only a little while longer to find out whether or not, even if we miss our departure date on May 14th of this year, you still have another exciting 18 months that we have left after that. That'll be 2019 till 2020. So yeah, you'll have a couple years left to wait, another 24 months, and then we can persevere. And if it doesn't happen after 24 months, who knows? We'll have some other motivator to get us ready to go home. But Jesus says to be watchful, and don't listen to those guys you see on Christian television that criticize us because we believe in the rapture and we're looking forward to it. Jesus said you should be watching for me. You should be anticipating me. You should be wanting to be with me. And the guys who claim to be Christians that say you shouldn't, they expose themselves as maybe not true believers. So that's a quick overview of our Palm Sunday, which just passed. So think about it this way. Jesus would have ridden into Jerusalem this past Sunday on a donkey, and because under the Mosaic laws we find in Exodus, because of what happened in Egypt the night of the Exodus, the tradition or the ceremony required the people to gather their perfect spotless lamb and present it to the high priest for observation on what day? Nisan 10. And the priest would then be under the obligation to observe and check those sacrificial lambs to make sure there's no defect, that they don't fall over and die from hoof and mouth disease or rabies or something like that. For 4 days they have to be observed to make sure they're perfect before they are now eligible to be sacrificed to the Lord 4 days later, which would be Nisan 14. And then, after they're sacrificed in the evening or in the late afternoon of Nisan 14, they're ritualistically killed, the blood is collected, then their flesh is roasted and eaten after sundown, which would now begin, because Israel starts their day after sundown, which would now become Nisan 15 after sundown. And Nisan 15 is what special day again?
Feast of Unleavened Bread?
It is the beginning of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And the first day of the 7-day Feast of Unleavened Bread is a special sacred day known as what?
Special Sabbath.
It's a special Sabbath, but that's not the name of it.
Yeah.
What's the name of it? It is the
Passover.
The Passover.
Yeah.
Come on. Yeah, there you go. It's the Passover. The Passover begins the 7-day Feast of Unleavened Bread. And so we find out then the lamb has to be presented to the priest, the temple, on Nisan 10, held for observation to Nisan 14 every year. On Nisan 14, at the end of the day, you kill the lamb, and then a few hours later, after sundown, that lamb is now cooked up and presented and eaten by the people during this special super holy meal known as the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, also known as the Passover, which is also known as a special Sabbath. It may fall on the Sabbath day some years, Saturday, which is what it will do this year. It'll fall on Saturday. But in other years, it won't fall on Saturday. On the year that Jesus was crucified, it fell on a Friday, so that you had a contiguous Sabbath, special Sabbath. You had the special Sabbath came first on a Friday, Nisan 14, And then you had the regular Sabbath, which came, excuse me, Nisan 15, the Friday, the special Sabbath. And then the next day was the regular Saturday Sabbath. So there's no contradiction in Scripture, and there's no tithing in Scripture either. But that's another story. At least for the church, there's no tithing. That's an aside. Throw that in for free. And there is no Friday crucifixion of Jesus. So there is no Good Friday. It's Good Thursday, if you want to call it that, or Sad Thursday. I think the Catholics call it Maundy Thursday, which I don't know what Maundy means. I forgot what that means, but there's some meaning, some obscure meaning that Rome attaches to everything they do, so you don't really understand anything. So anyway, okay, so we looked at Daniel chapter 9, verses 1 and 2. So Daniel has just read Jeremiah 25 and Jeremiah 29. He's understanding, wait a minute, we were supposed to be in captivity for only 70 years. I was 14 when I'm now, oh shoot, the 70 years is almost up. And so he gets so excited when he understood by looking at the books of Jeremiah 25 and 29, 7 years captivity is almost over. So he begins to praise and thank the Lord because he knows the Lord is going to fulfill his word. And while he's thanking the Lord, oh, thank you, Lord, that you kept me alive and you helped me persevere here in the land of Babylon under the rule of the Babylonians and then eventually under the rule of the Persians who took over from the Babylonians. This is wonderful. We're about to go home. I'm so excited. I'm thanking you in advance because I have faith. So while Daniel's doing this, we find out that he is visited by the messenger of the Lord, none other than Gabriel, the archangel. And so, Steve, go ahead and continue Daniel chapter 9, verses 20 through 23.
And while I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplications before the Lord my God, for the holy mountain of my God. Yea, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. And he informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding.
Okay, so now, Genevieve, pick us up in verse 24.
70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins and to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision of and prophecy and to anoint the most holy.
Okay, so that's a mouthful there. So Daniel is told, hey, guess what, kid? 70 weeks. Not 70 weeks of days, but 70 weeks of years and 70 weeks of prophetic years. Meaning that he's saying that after 490 years, Daniel, the holy city will be finished of its transgression. Sins will come to an end. Reconciliation will have been made for iniquity. Everlasting righteousness will have come to Jerusalem. The vision and prophecy will be sealed up, and the most holy, the Messiah, will be on the throne of his father David and anointed the king of Israel. All that's going to happen after 490 years. But it wasn't 490 contiguous years. It was 490 prophetic years. The first 483 years were contiguous from the marking point or the starting point that Gabriel is about to give Daniel. The restoration of the walls of Jerusalem, which had been destroyed during the Babylonian captivity by Nebuchadnezzar. So you could count forward 483 years consecutively or contiguously, one after another from 445 BC, to give us what? It would give us the special 69 weeks of years, period of time when the Messiah will be presented to not reign and rule over Israel, but to die. So in Daniel chapter 9, verse 24, you're getting the panorama of the entire 70 weeks of Daniel. So Daniel chapter 9, verse 24 gives us the 70 weeks of Daniel. This whole chart here is encompassed in Daniel chapter 9, verse 24. But when we get to verse 25 and 26, we find out that the 70 weeks is divided out into two parts. The first part is the first 69 weeks of years, or 483 years, which runs consecutive, contiguous, one right after another, and ends on Nisan 10, 32 AD because it began on Nisan 10 of 445 BC. So if you count it forward, 483 years, boom, you stop right here, 32 AD, Nisan 10. You don't have the following 7 years run contiguously, because then that would mean that everlasting righteousness and the Messiah would be on the throne of Israel by no later than 32 AD plus 7 will give you 39 AD. And so clearly, Jesus wasn't installed as the King of the Jews in 39 AD. All sin did not come to an end in the world in 39 AD. Everlasting righteousness didn't come to the planet Earth in 39 AD. We know that because Israel was actually chased out of their homeland in 70 AD, and they were scattered around the world. The diaspora occurred. So we know that that couldn't have happened. So what happened here? Did God get his math messed up? Did he flunk algebra or elementary school math? No. What happened is the first 69 weeks of years were contiguous to one another, because that was the time leading up to the first coming of the Messiah, so that he could come to be what? The King of the Jews, right?
No.
No.
The Lamb of God.
Right. And the Lamb of God gets what?
Sacrifice.
Sacrifice. That's right. What day does he get sacrificed, Ben? Can you?
14.
Okay. That's right. That's exactly right. And so Jesus came to die the first time. And after he did so, which we will celebrate, today and through Sunday, he actually gets killed today between the hours of 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. He's on the cross. Today, if this were 32 AD, it would have happened earlier today from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. He would have been on the cross and then taken down and buried. And so we would all be sad and crying right now because we'd be sad that he was gone. But we would then find 3 days later that he would rise from the dead, because it says in Matthew 12, verse 40, after 3 days and 3 nights, he would come back, just like Jonah did out of the mouth of the great fish. And so he goes up to heaven to prepare a place for us at the Father's house. And then the church age begins to run. So between Daniel chapter 9, verse 26, and Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, we have a 2,000-year period of time, a parenthesis called the church age. And during this church age, we're out doing evangelism, telling people about Jesus and getting saved so that we don't wind up going to hell. That time is drawing to a close, boys and girls. And I think that May 14th of this year coming up could be the terminus date of the parenthetical period between the first 69 weeks of years and the final 70th week of years. Between the first 483 years of Daniel's prophecy in Daniel 9 and the final 7 years of prophecy in Daniel's chapter 9. That 7-year period of time that is to run, we will be at the Father's house in heaven, getting our rewards for all the wonderful things we did for Christ as followers of Jesus Christ. Oh, I see a full moon out there. I'm looking out the window, looking at the beautiful full moon over Miami Beach and the Atlantic Ocean. I hear tomorrow morning, is it tomorrow morning? I think yes, like it's some pink moon or something, like it's the mini blood moon, the pink moon, that will be visible on Good Friday, the Catholics call it. But anyway, so yes, we find out then that 70 is a big deal. And so that 70 weeks of Daniel can't run until the 70th week plays out. But the 70th week can't play out until the church is taken out, because the 70th week of Daniel is also the day of the Lord's wrath. It's also the day of the judgment of God on the Christ-rejecting sinners of this world, and the judgment on Satan's man, the Antichrist, who pretends to be Jesus and sits on the mercy seat in the rebuilt temple of Jerusalem, of Israel in Jerusalem, and declares himself to be God. So God's going to be judging Antichrist for his abominations, and the people of the planet Earth, the children of men, the sons of Adam, daughters of Eve, who have rejected Jesus Christ. Now, the church wouldn't need to go through that. Preterists, Presbyterians, Calvinists. Church doesn't need to go through that because we haven't rejected Christ. So God doesn't need to judge us or punish us for rejecting his son. We accepted his son. So why would we share in the judgment of the world, the Christ-rejecting world? No, we will be taken to the safety of the Father's house in heaven, and we'll be safe there. And we see that in Isaiah chapter 26, verses 7 through 10, I think it is. But we talked about that in the last few weeks, where the rapture is really laid out in the Old Testament, 500 years before Jesus. So, okay, so Genevieve gave us that. Now, Ben, if you would, pick us up, Daniel chapter 9, verse 25.
Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times.
Okay, so now Ben, you went to Harvard undergrad and you got your MBA from the Wharton School of Business, the world's most famous business school. So now let's see what Wharton taught Ben and whether he knows how to count. Okay, so Daniel chapter 9 verse 25 says, "Know therefore and understand from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem," which we have historically proven in the past that occurred on Nisan 10, 445 BC. We have archaeological finds that prove that beyond conclusion, beyond dispute. So, from the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem, Nisan 10, 445 BC, until the arrival of Messiah the Prince shall be, how long been? 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Now, how many weeks would that be?
69 weeks.
Okay, so you
Years.
take the 7 weeks, and then you take 3 score. How long is a score?
20.
Okay, so if you had 3 scores, how many would that be?
60.
So you had 60 to 7, that gives you, but that only gives you 67. And 2 weeks. Okay, so the Holy Spirit knew that I was an idiot and he threw an extra 2 weeks. Okay, so after the 2 weeks, the street shall be built again, the wall again. Okay, even in troublous times. So we know that we're counting for 69 weeks of days, Ben?
Of years.
Of years, right, because Israel is an agrarian state and they talked in terms of weeks of years. So you grew the land for 1 agrarian week, which would be a 7-year period of time, where you grow the land for 6 years, and the 7th year you wouldn't grow the land and harvest it. Why? Because you were giving the land what?
Rest.
It's Sabbath rest. And Jeremiah says the reason why Israel got sent into captivity for 70 years in what you read about Daniel chapter 9 and Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, is because Israel for 490 years cheated the land out of its rest because it didn't trust God enough to give. God would give super abundant crop harvest on the 6th year, so that you would be able to take into your storehouse twice as much as you would take in years 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Why? Because the 7th year, you wouldn't be allowed to grow your land. So if you're Farmer John in Israel, you were told by God, don't plant any seeds next season, but don't worry, I'm going to make you have a double harvest. And so what happened is, it showed that Israel lost faith in God, even though he had been proving himself all these years. They decided, we got rich, fertile soil, let's strike while the iron's hot, we're going to start growing the 7th year too. And God ignored it the first few years. And then they went on several decades. And their greed to grow the land and store up a harvest so that they can trust in their own hard work irritated God. And so after 490 years of this, God finally intervened and told Jeremiah, tell the people they're going into captivity in Babylon. How long are they going in captivity? They're going in for how many years?
7 years.
We can all sing together. We can't all talk together. Okay, now wait. Steve, how long did you say it was?
70.
And Ben, you said 7.
70.
Oh, did you say 70? I think you cheated. I think you looked on Steve's report card and saw his answer. Didn't you say 70? 7?
70.
Okay, all right. So you guys both got it right. Now here's the the sort of college prep class question: why 70 years as opposed to 80?
Because over 490 years, there would have been 70 years worth of harvest or fallow years that they had cheated God on.
We find that exact thing in Jeremiah chapter 25 and 29, because it says that God was punishing Israel to get back the 70 years land. You cheated the land out of 70 years rest because you grew the 7th year for 490 years. So if you divide 7 into 490, you get 70 years. So I'm giving the land the 70 years I decreed for it by putting you in the penalty box in the outhouse for 70 years, so the land could have her 70 years rest. And that's exactly what it says. So the land of Israel could enjoy her 70 years rest. And it's also symbolic of what, Steve? You work 6 days, the 7th day you rest on the Sabbath because the body needs it so you can recharge the batteries. But that's also just a metaphor for what? For the millennial creation week. God created the whole universe in 6 days, and on the 7th day he did what? He rested. Not because he was tired, but because he was finished. God doesn't get tired. But he was setting an example for us. That's why we have a 6-day work week. The 7th day you're supposed to rest. now it's 5 days and, you get the weekend or whatever. But God had intended, for there to be a week of time that man would do things in, and the last day of which you would rest. And so we also have the idea of the millennial week. Let me get this thought out, and then
That's it.
oh, see how your teacher is on top of it, Ben. I got this, bro. I got it all done, man. I'm there, brother. So believe me, I'm gonna get you your money's worth. So there's also the school of thought of the millennial week of years, and also the idea that the 6 days work with a 7th day rest plays itself out over 6 consecutive 24-hour periods of time, but also plays itself out over, we find out both in the Old and New Testament that it says that God sees a day as what?
1,000 years.
And 1,000 years is a day. So wait a minute. So 24-hour period of time for me is a day. But also in God's eyes, it can be also not billions and billions of years, but 1,000 years. So is he saying, when he laid out in Genesis chapter 1 and 2, that man is to work for 6 days and rest the 7th day because the 7th day is the Sabbath day's rest, was he also hinting that there would be 6 God days or 6 millennial days of toil and strife and hard working and labor for the human race, meaning 6,000 years, and then when the 7,000th year arrives, that would be the millennial day of rest for the whole human race. That's exactly what we premillennial, pre-tribulation rapture people believe, that God is indicated in the sort of metaphorical and symbolic language of Scripture. There's usually a double entendre, a literal plain meaning and a subtextual meaning. I think it means that we're supposed to work 6 days, 24-hour periods of time, and on the 7th day, you rest so your body can recuperate. That's why we have a 7-day work week or a 7-day week, and then you rest on the Sunday or the last day of the week. But I also think it means that God is telling us that we would have 6,000 years of human history prior to the beginning of the final day of the rest of the people of the planet Earth, which will be the millennial reign of Christ on the earth. And we are now, don't let the old earth creationists trick you, or the secular humanists, biologists and scientists from the Ivy League schools tell you that the earth is billions and billions of years old. Now, the genealogies in the Bible seem to suggest, and I would suggest archaeological finds also seem to suggest, and there's a number of reasons why I could make this argument, we don't have time to go into it, but Ken Hovind does a great job of explaining why you can know for sure, the distance of the moon from the earth. The moon is drifting away from the earth. And the way he phrased it, such as his inimitable Ken Hovind style, he says, okay, class, now, if the moon is drifting away from the earth at a certain set, amount per year, then that means it used to be
closer.
And he's disclosing, like, how many you can figure that out without any help at all? Okay, so he's saying if the moon is acceding away or separating out from the planet Earth at X amount, and some astrophysicist somewhere has figured out to like the billionth of an inch how far we're losing the moon each year. He says if the Earth is billions and billions of years, then the moon would have been sitting on the planet Earth. No more than like 20,000 years ago. You've had a collision, everybody would be dead. But he says if the Earth is only about 6,000 years of age, then the moon should be where it is right now, based upon the amount of distance that is growing between the Earth and the moon per year. So if you extrapolate back, retrograde extrapolation, you use that for DUI testing. For those of you that drive, don't drink, because they use retrograde extrapolation to find out how drunk you were at the time you were driving based on how drunk you are right now. So when you use that same sort of science to apply to the distance of the moon from the Earth, we know for a fact that the Earth can't be billions of years old, because the moon would have crashed into the Earth, 20,000 years ago. So now we know that the Earth, for that reason and many others, there's other stuff about how much silt is on the surface of the moon and so on and so forth, and erosion of the seas and the mountains, and if the Earth were billions of years old or even millions of years old, there would be a lot more erosion, there would be a lot more, what we see as decay. So we know that combined with the genealogies in the Bible present the idea that the Earth is probably about 6,000 years old. And if that's the case, Then there's another tremendous argument for the rapture happening soon. Because the rapture has to occur first before the millennial reign of Christ. In fact, you have to have the rapture first, and then you would have to have the 70th week of Daniel. You'd have to have that final, how many year period of time, Genevieve, in the 70th week? How many years?
7.
7 years. That's right. 70th week is the final unit of 7 years. Just like a week is a unit of 7 days, a millennial, a sort of the agrarian millennial week or week of years is units of 7. Not days, but years. So the 70th week would be 7 years. That 7-year period of time is also the tribulation period, divided out into the Great Tribulation period and the tribulation period that precedes it. Also known as the Day of the Lord. Also known as the 70th week of Daniel. Also known as the Day of the Lord's Wrath. Those things have to happen first, at the end of which there will be one final cataclysmic battle known as the Battle of Armageddon, which will occur in the northern part of Israel, plain of Jezreel, and Jesus will come back himself in person and destroy the Antichrist, and after that, he will then be installed as the King of the Jews in Jerusalem and will reign from the Temple Mount, the rebuilt temple. And he will reign for how long?
1,000 years.
That's right, that's right. His reign we find out in Isaiah chapter 9 will be forever. And of his kingdom there will be no end, but it won't start in forever, and it won't start in eternity. It'll start right here on the planet Earth at the conclusion of the 70th week of Daniel. The Messiah returns to the Mount of Olives in the same fashion in which he went away. He destroys the Antichrist and then sets up his rule. And the Bible says he's going to rule with a rod of iron. He won't be the dusty-footed Galilean carpenter, the humble, Jesus loves peace thing. No, he'll be kicking tail and taking names for whoever isn't one of his followers. In fact, the people that aren't his followers at Armageddon are going to be destroyed, killed, and then be eventually resurrected at the end of the millennium and put into the lake of fire forever. So, Jesus is going to rule, and there's going to be peace on earth because he's going to demand it for 1,000 years after the conclusion of the 70th week. And so, again, what we see is the triumphal entry, Palm Sunday, which we talked about a little bit, and we're going to have to talk about next week too, because we're not going to be able to get all this awesome material into just tonight's teaching. So it's so awesome. We're going to talk about it, at an extended length of time next week as well. But let's go ahead and go back and see. This is good. This is review. I know we've talked about this years gone by, but I think by repetition you finally start to pick up things, and I think you guys are picking up some of these things so that you can be able to explain it. I know Rod out there in TV land has heard this many times, but he said, man, I always tune in for the annual resurrection of Jesus, Palm Sunday, and Thursday crucifixion teaching. And so, this is key stuff that you aren't always going to get in our commercial 501c3 churches. So, anyway, there you have it. I was actually at Calvary Chapel for a lot of it, and it turns out I had a client he's a yacht captain, but he's on some kind of house arrest thing, and he could only travel so many feet from his house, and he lives right down the street from Calvary, so he said, I'll meet you at Calvary Chapel. So we met there, and of course he was late as the Lord would have it, so I was like stuck, and I was like, oh shoot, there's a Wednesday night service. So I just popped in, and Pastor Fidel, who's probably the only one of the Calvary Chapel pastors that I still recall from back in the days when we were going there before Bob Coy left. And he was actually talking about Matthew 24, so I have to say he did it. Told too many jokes during it, but at least he was talking about Bible probably. And I said, oh yeah, this is some of the stuff I'm going to be talking about tomorrow. So that was good. I got to hear, his spin on Matthew 24, which is basically that, the Lord's laid out a bunch of signs, and, we probably are in the end of the time of the signs, which means the rapture is going to occur very shortly. So, okay, we went through Daniel chapter 25. Now let's have Ben pick us up. Well, before Ben picks us up, let's go ahead and have Ben take us into, read Daniel 9:25 one more time, Genevieve.
Yes, sir. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times.
Okay, so Daniel 9, chapter verse 25 simply says that there's going to be 69 weeks of the years, or 483 years, which are all going to be contiguous from the decree of Artaxerxes Longimanus to allow Israel to restore and rebuild its walls, all the way to the coming of the Messiah will be 483 years to the day, or 173,880 days. And before we get into Daniel chapter 9, verse 26, jump, if you will, over to Luke chapter 19 and lay the foundation for what we're going to see happening in Daniel 9, 26, and 27. Luke 19, read for us verses 35 through 44, if you would, Ben.
And they brought him to Jesus. And they cast their garments upon the colt, and they set Jesus thereon. And as he went, they spread their clothes in the way. And when he was come nigh, even now at the descent of the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of the disciples began to rejoice and praise God with a loud voice for all the mighty works that they had seen, saying, Blessed be the King that cometh in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven, and glory in the highest. And some of the Pharisees from among the multitude said unto him, Master, rebuke thy disciples. And he answered and said unto them, I tell you that, if these should hold their peace, the stones would immediately cry out. And when he was come near, he beheld the city and wept over it, saying, If thou hast known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace, but now they are hid from thine eyes. For the day shall come upon thee, that thine enemies shall cast a trench about thee, and compass thee round, and keep thee in on every side, and shall lay thee even with the ground, and thy children within thee, and they shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation.
What is Jesus going on about? What is he so up in arms about? What's he crying about? Steve?
Daniel chapter 9, verse 25.
Right. So what we find out then is that Luke is recording an event in Luke 19. The people threw their garments in front of the donkey Jesus was riding on, and they said, Blessed be the King who comes in the name of the Lord. And the Pharisees got upset and said, Hey, Master, tell your disciples to tell the people to shut up. And Jesus said, if these would remain silent, the very rocks themselves, the stones would cry out. Why? Because today was the day. What day? The 173,880th day from Artaxerxes Longimanus' decree. So if you count it forward, 173,880 days, boom, here you are. Jesus is now riding into Jerusalem on a Sunday before the Passover. It's what we call Palm Sunday. The reason why we call it Palm Sunday is because while the people were using a messianic psalm, which we find in Psalm chapter 118, verse 26, that's a special psalm that only applies to the Messiah. Hosanna in the highest, blessed be the King who comes in the name of the Lord. That is understood and was understood by the nation of Israel to be the tagline for the arrival of the Messiah to rule on the throne of his father David. And so when the Pharisees heard that being used, that's blasphemy. You can't say that to anybody. That's only reserved for the Messiah. Unless what? You're saying this guy's the Messiah, right? And they were like, yeah. And the people, being moved by the Holy Spirit, apparently uttered out the messianic psalm of arrival, the first advent of the Messiah in the land of Israel. And Jesus said, if they didn't say it, the stones would start saying it. Why? Because this was the day, and God in his divine providence wasn't going to let the day go by without it being marked and being broadcast to the people, so the people could say, couldn't have the excuse that they didn't know, because the stones told you if the people had. So they cry out the messianic psalm in Psalm chapter 118, verse 26. Hosanna in the highest, blessed be the King who comes in the name of the Lord. And Jesus, at this point, looks out over the city of Jerusalem as he's riding into it. And he begins to cry. And he says, if thou hadst known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong to thy peace. But now they are hidden from thy eyes. Why? Because they're verbalizing the messianic psalm, but they haven't accepted him as the Messiah. Israel as a whole, and Israel's leaders, sometimes, it's said that God judges us by giving us the leaders, Steve talks about this a lot, that we deserve. And so we've had ungodly rulers in our land for a long time because we've made some ungodly decisions about Roe versus Wade, homosexuality, promotion of pornography, all of these things. And so sometimes the leaders we get could be a judgment on us, from God. It's not, oh man, these people are terrible, or whatever, and we got to pray that God, this is God's judgment for our sins by giving us wicked people to rule over us and destroy our land. And America's being dissolved by the day as I see it. It's not the same land that I grew up in. It's not the America I grew up in the Midwest when I was a kid. America's different, and not different for the better. And I think the judgment of God is on us because we've done things like back in the 70s, had our Supreme Court defy the will of God himself by saying that a woman's right to abortion on demand is absolutely the law of the land. So instead of using contraceptives or a little self-discipline, you can use the speculum and the, whatever else they use, I guess, during an abortion, scalpel, and cut the head of the baby off and vacuum them out, vacuum suck them. So you do these things now. We've done it to the tune of 75 million babies, I think, since Roe versus Wade, 1972, was it? And so the judgment of God, I think, is, like that verse in the Bible says, the iniquity of the Amorites was not yet come to the full. I think the iniquity of the Amorites here in the United States is coming pretty much to the full, and it's wickedness. And that means I think it's time for the church to get out and the judgment to come. So, Messianic Psalm, Jesus looks out and says, the people are, worshiping me or acknowledging me with their mouth, but their hearts are far from me. They're not accepting me as the Messiah, the Lord. And he cries and he says, I'm not crying for me because you've rejected me. I'm crying for you because you've rejected me. Why? Because the days will come because of what you've done by not accepting me as the Messiah. He says, because you didn't know. You were supposed to know. Why were they supposed to know, Steve?
Because it was already prophesied hundreds of years ago.
And these guys prided themselves on yeshiva and being scholars of the Bible. The Pharisees were these big, important religious hoop-de-hoo guys. If you're such a religious hoop-de-hoo, how come you didn't read the book of Daniel? And why couldn't you figure out that you were being told the day the Messiah was going to arrive to the day 5 centuries in advance? You had 500 years to figure it out. I told you, God says, the day I was going to send my son as the Messiah to be the king of Israel, and when that day arrived, you rejected him. And Jesus says, I'm crying because you rejected me, but not because my feelings are hurt. I'm crying because your rejection of me will cause this to happen. Verse 43 of Luke chapter 19. For the day shall come upon thee, that thine enemy shall cast a trench about thee, and compass thee around, and keep thee in on every side, and lay thee even with the ground, and thy children within thee, and they shall not leave one stone upon another, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation. Today, he could have added. And what time was he talking about? He was prophetically looking forward in time. 30, 40, about 38 years later, on 70 A.D., the Romans invaded, destroyed the temple, laid it even with the ground. When the gold melted down between the cracks, they had to take the temple apart stone by stone to get to the gold, so that not one stone remained upon another in the temple that was not cast down to the ground while the Roman centurions searched for gold. And the Jews were driven out of the land of Israel in the great diaspora of 70 A.D. And Jesus says, all of this occurred because you knew not the time of thy visitation. And so, now, we can go ahead and say that that's the fulfillment of the first 69 weeks of years. Messiah was to be presented. But what's he being presented for? Well, Steve's going to tell us. Daniel chapter 9, verse 26.
And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off.
So what he's saying there, 62 weeks, he's giving us the last two variables of an algebraic equation. Because that always messed me up. I was like, 62. After 62, Messiah. Is he cut off after 69 weeks of years or after 62 weeks? No, he's just giving you, like, he's reading an algebraic equation and he's shortening it. He said after the 62 weeks, which preceded by the 7 weeks, meaning after the 69 weeks, Steve, what happens?
Shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. And unto the end of the war, desolations are determined.
Okay, so what we find out then is after 69 weeks of years, Steve says the Messiah shall be cut off. In the Hebrew, it's karat. Karat means to be killed. Pierced to the death is what karat means in Hebrew. And we find out it's not because he was a robber or a thief or a pedophile or a criminal. He was cut off not for himself. Well, who was he cut off for? For us, for the people. He was innocent, and Daniel 9:26 says so. He was killed, and the people of the prince that shall come, that shall destroy the temple. Who destroyed the temple?
Romans.
So that's why most pre-tribulation rapture believers believe that the Antichrist will be, if not Italian, who will be from one of the countries that was part of the expansive Roman Empire at that time. And there's a bunch of different countries that are included. So we can't narrow it down to just, Italy or the Iberian Peninsula or whatever. It's going to be a lot of different areas that were part of the Roman Empire. Antichrist will come from out of that. Some people think it's Emmanuel Macron of France is a great candidate for. I read a really interesting article about it the other day. I was like, there was some surprisingly interesting, things in there that would suggest the same. But I also noticed that, when I was thinking about doing a little reading about I was waiting for this guy, reading about the Ezekiel 38, 39 War of Gog and Magog, how it talks about Persia and the nation out of the north, Gog, and Turkey will be teamed up. And the guy pointed out, he said, for the first time in history, all of those nations mentioned in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, the War of Gog and Magog, Russia, Turkey, and Iran, which used to be Persia, have now gathered themselves together and have a presence in the nation of Syria. Syria is what? Directly due, not west, east, or south, but due north of the land of Israel. So you've got the Old Testament prophesied 1,500 years ago nations of the Gog-Magog war of Ezekiel 38 and 39, which gives you Persia or Iran, Russia, which a lot of people think that's what Gog means, and Turkey, gathered together in the land of Syria, which is directly due north of the land of Israel. So you have perched just miles away from the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. You got just step over the border, and Ezekiel 38, 39 begins to become fulfilled. And some people think it's because Israel has found a tremendous cache of natural gas right off its coast, that might be a reason why Russia would, desperate for natural energy to get away from, the oil-dominated Arabs who can control the land, that might be something that economically would drive them to invade Israel, to steal their natural gas fields. But they would have to team up with the Muslims, and Turkey being a part of that. And so you look at the House of Togarmah being associated with the nation Turkey, and Persia being associated with the modern-day nation of Iran. You see, man, we're right there. Now the only question is, does the War of Gog and Magog occur before the Battle of Armageddon? Yes, I think it does. It leads up to the Battle of Armageddon. But does it occur before or after the rapture? And nobody knows for sure. There's no particular verse in the Bible that says it has to happen before or after. So it could happen right after the rapture occurs, or it could happen any day now, and the rapture occurs after that. But it's exciting times that we live in. We're living in the time of the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. The time of the sign, somebody called it. So Steve laid out for us, after 62 weeks, after the 69 weeks of years, the Messiah would be cut off. And that's exactly what happened on Nisan 14, 32 AD. which is what if we were commemorating that, we would commemorate his crucifixion, his death, today. And so today is the day we would commemorate as the day that he was cut off for our sins. This is what was celebrated at the Last Supper, which was not the Passover, but it was a special commemoration of the death of Jesus Christ Day. And so that would be today. If we were having a meal tonight, we would be breaking bread and saying, we're doing this in the name of Jesus to remember his sacrifice and his death. Because today, Thursday, was the day that he was crucified for our sins. And then he's in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. And then he rises before sunrise on Sunday, which is Resurrection Day, not Easter, because we're not pagans. It's Easter for the pagans, but it's not Easter for us, the followers of Jesus Christ. Right? You don't want to be, making your Lord share his glory with some fertility goddess who's a harlot and a prostitute and really Satan dressed in drag, which he's wont to do from time to time, as I've said before. So, anyway, so there's no Christian Easter. That's really a pagan holiday. Though it does exist, and so when people say the King James Version of the Bible is wrong because it uses the word Easter instead of Passover, no. Herod was not Christian, and he wasn't a follower of Judaism either. He wasn't celebrating the Passover. He was a pagan. He was celebrating the Feast of Ishtar, Easter. So he was saying, I'm having my feast and partying, getting drunk, having an orgy, and then I'll take care of the dirty business of killing Peter. So after Easter, we'll knock him off. But the modern translations like NIV and NASB and all that, they substitute in the word Passover because because it's the Passover. Easter's pagan, so that shouldn't be in the Bible. No, the pagan king that it was referring to was celebrating a pagan festival. So the King James is actually the only one of all the modern translations, of all the English translations, that gets it actually right, because the king that was going to kill Peter was a pagan who celebrated Easter, Ishtar. Ashtoreth, in the fertility goddess of the spring. He didn't celebrate the resurrection of Jesus or the Passover. So, King James has it right. So anyway, so Steve laid that out for us, and that's why Jesus had to ride in on a donkey on Nisan 10 of 32 AD, which he did, which we celebrated last week as Palm Sunday. And the reason, again, why they call it Palm Sunday is because when the people were saying, "Blessed be the King who comes in the name of the Lord," they were also doing what?
Putting palms down the road.
Well, they were putting their garments in the road
Right.
for the donkey to ride over, but they were taking palm fronds, sort of like you see the palm trees along Miami Beach, that fall off the tree, so like boom, they hit you in the head or they hit your car.
Yeah.
They're like gigantic fans,
Yeah.
and they're kind of heavy actually. And so as Jesus rode by, they would grab the palm fronds that fell off the palm trees, and he would wave them, like kind of to give them a breeze and to kind of just show obeisance. You're the king, you're the king. Like, you see in some of these Cecil Miller movies when Cleopatra rides in and they take the palm fronds and they wave it down. Royalty is coming. Oh, bow down with the palm frond. And that's what they were doing. They were acknowledging Jesus. Genevieve?
Yeah, when you said that, the Spirit allowed them to do that while he was coming.
Yeah, the Spirit allowed them to do that. Why? Because God wanted the whole world to bear witness to the glorification of his Son. The glorious Son of God was fulfilling centuries, millennia even, old prophecies that God would come to earth in the form of a man to do what? Not to take over the world and rule as a king, but to die for the sins of the world. That was the whole purpose of Jesus coming to the earth, was so that he could make up for what Adam did in the garden. Adam destroyed, perverted, and condemned the entire human race to eternity in the lake of fire by listening to the voice of his wife in rebellion to the voice of his God. And because we are the biogenetic descendants of Adam, our father, we are the children of men, the sons of Adam, daughters of Eve. We've inherited his defective Y chromosome gene that now infects us with physical death that takes place after about 70 or 80 years, and also infects us with spiritual death that takes place immediately from out of the womb. We are dead men walking from the time we pop out of our mother's womb. Our physical bodies are growing, but they're dying too. Cells begin dying as soon as you're born. It's just that they replicate at so much greater a rate of speed that you get bigger and bigger and bigger with each passing month. Your cells get multiplied, and your skin stretches and your bones grow, and you get bigger and bigger and bigger up until about 18. And then at 18 to 20, it levels off. And then you have your sort of period of homeostasis, and then you begin to lose the battle, because the speed at which you're replicating new cells begins to go slower than the speed at which you're losing old cells, which are dying. And you've been constantly dying since you were born. I forgot, some geneticist, or it wasn't a geneticist, maybe a biologist, molecular biologist, said, you've worn like hundreds, if not thousands, of different coats of skin over the course of your lifetime. You've completely replicated out all the cells in your skin several times over, like a snake with shedded skin by the time you're old and die. Because you don't lose them all at one time, like a snake molts and pulls out his whole body out and he loses all your skin at once. But you're losing cells. You slough off scales, and then your skin cells are in your bed, and when you go take a shower or you use a loofah pad, you're scrubbing yourself. What are you doing? You're scrubbing off all the dead cells, which can then be replaced, right? Ingrid does it. Genevieve does it. She's in that shower trying to beautify herself with a loofah, and she's scrubbing it to make the old skin go away, and it's replaced by new skin. But what happens is that at some point in time, as the telomeres shorten, which is what ties your DNA strands together, makes it look like a bow tie, the thing that holds it. It's like the shoelace, the thing that you push through the eyelet, the little plastic thing at the end of a shoelace, so that the little point in it. That's what it looks like when you look at a DNA molecule, and it's called the telomere. And each time it replicates itself, the telomere, or the plastic eyelet thing for your shoe, shortens and shortens and shortens and shortens. And after it replicates so many times, it can't replicate anymore. And that's when you physically die, because you can't replicate. So you're losing cells at a greater rate than you're gaining them, and that's what aging is. And so oxidation of cells means the cells rust and die. Antioxidants are found in fruits and vegetables. They slow down the rate at which cells rust out and die. So you tend to live longer or age less quickly. But that's an aside. So, because Adam sinned, we inherited his spiritual and physical death. Jesus came to reverse the curse. And so, when he came the first time at the end of the 69 weeks of years, it's a glorious time that should be commemorated by the Lord and by the people of the planet Earth, so that they can know in 4 days, the greatest sacrifice in the history of the universe will occur. God himself will offer up himself on his own altar to pay for the sin debt of his rebellious creation, so he won't have to judge his rebellious creation, because he loves them. So that's what happens 4 days later on Nisan 10, which is what we would have commemorated today between the hours of 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. He would have been on the cross today if he rode into Jerusalem on this past Sunday, and then he'd rise from the dead again after 3 days and 3 nights on Sunday before sunrise. And so that's what we have. And so we've completed the 70 weeks of Daniel. Now, when we pick up next week, we're going to talk again about why there can't be a Friday crucifixion. We'll touch on it real quick, but we're not going to have time, because I know, Rod has to get to bed eventually. And since we started late, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys finish. It's already past 9 o'clock. But just a highlight of what's coming next week, here is your timeline drawn out by the artistic hand of Herb Walker himself. So Wednesday, Nisan 13, from 6 a.m. to 5:59 p.m. would be the day, Wednesday, Nisan 13. Jesus shares his Last Supper with the 12 apostles in the upper room. From about 4 p.m., I would say, to maybe about 10 p.m. And then they go out to the brook Kidron and the Garden of Gethsemane, and Judas comes and betrays him. So I put down Nisan 13 and 14. Now, why am I putting down 2 days?
Because it would have started on the 13th, but by the time the morning of the 14th...
Well, look at it like this. When they sat down to eat, when they were ordering the menu and they brought out the appetizers, it was Nisan 13.
Sure.
By the time dessert got served at 8 or 9 o'clock, it was already the 14th, because the day switches not at midnight, but at sundown, so at about 6 o'clock. So if dinner started about 4, then it was Nisan 14. dinner would have ended several hours later after sundown, so it would have switched over to Nisan 14. So the Last Supper is on Wednesday, Nisan 13. Now we find out that Jesus is arrested probably about 6 a.m. and he's put on trial several times by Caiaphas, Annas, Herod the Great, and then eventually by Pontius Pilate. He's acquitted by Pilate and then sentenced to be killed. And so he's on trial, illegal trials during the night. Can't have trials at nighttime in Israel under the law of Moses, but they did. So it was an illegal trial. So that happens between 6 and 9 a.m. and eventually at 9 a.m. Pilate comes out to the Praetorium, says, "I find no guilt in this man. What do you want to have done? We want him crucified." The nation of Israel says, "He said, all right, I'm washing my hands of this innocent man's blood, and I'll let him be crucified, and I'll let Barabbas go for your Passover." Because the Passover hadn't happened yet. In honor of your upcoming Passover, I'm going to let one of the prisoners go. The murderer, thief, Barabbas, or the prophet man, Jesus. And they shouted for Barabbas, and Jesus died in the place of a criminal. And so, Passover lambs throughout the nation of Israel are being slaughtered at what time? Towards the end of the day on what day? Thursday, which is Nisan 14. So the Last Supper begins on Wednesday, and after sundown, we switch over to Nisan 14. So that morning when he's on trial, it will be for us a Thursday. It'll be Nisan 14. So he goes on trial, Nisan 14, 6 a.m. He's convicted after being acquitted and sentenced to death and hangs on the cross between 9 and 3 p.m. on Nisan 14. And then they have to hurriedly take him down from the cross. Why? Because the Jews know that they will defile themselves by touching dead bodies, because in a few hours they have to do what? They have to
Celebrate feast, yeah.
celebrate the Passover, which is the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So Jesus didn't have the Passover with the disciples in John chapter 13, 14, 15, 16. It's the preparation for the Passover. We'll look at those verses in detail next week. So Jesus is now buried before 6 p.m. because the Passover is about to begin. But wait a minute. Because the scripture says the Sabbath was about to begin, so he had to be hurriedly taken down from the cross. And this is where the Catholics make their mistake. They say because the Sabbath was about to begin and he had to hurriedly be taken down from the cross, it had to be Friday that he was crucified on, because the Sabbath is Saturday for the Jews. So they had Good Friday. But no, there was a special Sabbath that year that fell on Nisan 15 that year. So just like Passover's on Saturday this year, but it won't be on Saturday next year, that year, the Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the special Sabbath fell on Nisan 15, which was a Friday. So, what we find then is that Nisan 14, Jesus has to be taken down from the cross, because on Nisan 15, which is
And high day.
right, it's an high day, a special Sabbath. It's the day in the book of Exodus, in the light that it says you have to celebrate your Feast of Unleavened Bread with the special first day, the Passover. You got to kill the Passover lamb and eat him just after sundown on the 15th, the day after the sacrifice. So you have to kill the Passover lamb on Nisan 15. So whether Nisan 15 falls on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you got to kill the Passover lamb late in the day on the 14th, cook them up, and a few hours later, sit down at the table and eat them, because that's what they did in Egypt. They didn't have time to put leaven in the bread so the bread can rise, because they were in such a hurry to get out of Egypt. And so the same thing happens here. You eat unleavened bread and the Passover lamb, or the Paschal lamb that's been killed late in the day. So while Jesus is hanging on the cross, all throughout the land of Israel, Passover lambs are being ritualistically slaughtered, and their blood is being poured out in the temple in Jerusalem at the same time that Jesus is being the king, the big Passover lamb. And you sit down and eat them a few hours later, and Jesus says, unless you take my flesh and eat of it, and take my blood and drink of it, you have no part of me. So he's not saying cannibalism, he's saying this whole Passover thing, what you've been doing with these little lambs for centuries, is symbolic of you becoming born again and taking me into your spirit and ingesting me the same way you would a meal. So, okay, Nisan 15 begins at sundown. So Jesus has to be getting off the cross by 3 p.m., put in Joseph of Arimathea's grave. They don't have time to fix up the body. Why? Because the Passover was about to begin. Because oh shoot, the sun is pretty low in the sky. We got to get out of here or we'll get defiled and we won't be able to celebrate the Passover. So they had to bail out on Jesus' body and not put all the ointments and all the stuff they were supposed to put on him. So they wrapped him in the little mummy thing and put the wax, paper mache stuff on him so it would stick to his skin. And then they were going to come back after the second Sabbath, the Saturday Sabbath, and put the ointment on him. So, okay, so this is what happens now. Jesus is put into the grave. Now, sun goes down, which starts Friday, Nisan 15, which is the special high Sabbath. So, all throughout the land of Israel, people are now on Nisan 15 enjoying, hours after the crucifixion of Jesus, the Passover, where they're eating the lamb that was killed at the temple a few hours earlier. Jesus is now in the grave for the second day. And now you have the regular Saturday Sabbath. So guess what? The ladies in the church can't go to the tomb to fix up Jesus' body with the ointments because now they're stuck because the Saturday Sabbath has begun. So they can't desecrate themselves because the regular Sabbath is there. So Jesus has to wait until Sunday. So the first day of the week for the Jews, remember I told you I studied international law at Tel Aviv University Law School, and for us the first day of the week was Sunday. And it was weird because we had to go back to class. We'd get, Friday and Saturday off. And we could go to Jerusalem on the bus, but you couldn't come back because they had rules on the Sabbath. The buses wouldn't operate. So if you went, you were stuck.
Yeah.
And so, but you had to be back to class Sunday morning because that was the first day of the week. So it was a little weird getting up and going to class first thing Sunday morning. And so, so Saturday, Nisan 16, is the regular Saturday Sabbath. So now Jesus has been in the grave 1, 2, 3 days already. And at the end of the regular Sabbath, which ended at about 6 p.m. that night, now Nisan 17 would occur. And at this point, the ladies in the church went to sleep Saturday night. And when they woke up, Sabbath is over, and it's the first day of the week. So while it's still dark out, they run over to the tomb to put the ointments on it. Because now they don't want the body to decay and start stinking. And they couldn't do it either on Friday because it was the special Sabbath of the Passover, or Saturday because it was the regular Sabbath of the Saturday. So now Sunday morning, first day of the work week, they go out before sunrise and find the body's gone. So now you have 3 days. What's first day? First day is Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But before sunrise, he's gone. So he doesn't have 4 days in the grave. He has 3 days. And you have 3 nights, right? Because you got a Friday night, Saturday night, and then you got Sunday night because it was still dark out when he rose from the dead. So you got 3 days and 3 nights. This is exactly what Matthew chapter 12, verse 40 says. 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale. I'm going to spend 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. And so Jesus arises before sunrise on Nisan 17, and that gives us the glorious, glorious fulfillment of the prophecies. So triumphal entry, we find Luke chapter 19, verse 28 through 44. So, Ben, why don't you flip over to Matthew chapter 12, verse 40, and that'll tell us why we have to have the 3 days and 3 nights.
Matthew 12, what verse?
Verse 40.
40. For as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth.
Okay, so you had to have 3 days and 3 nights, Ben. You can't have a Good Friday. Because you can't get 3 days and 3 nights from a Friday, right? So let's start here, start Friday. How are you going to get 3 days and 3 nights? 1, 2. You get 2 days and 2 nights. Or you could count, if you got crucified, you get 3 days and 2 nights. But you can't get 3 days and 3 nights. So you can't have a Good Friday crucifixion. Got to have a Good Thursday crucifixion. And that's what we have. So we're biblically accurate here. We're followers of the Bible here in this house. And so there you have the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so I laid out here, 32 AD, Passover came on the special Sabbath of the Passover came on Friday. And Sir Robert Anderson confirmed all this with his mathematical charts. And this is one of the few times you would have contiguous special Sabbath and regular Sabbath. So Passover Sabbath, you have that, just like, you'll have a Christmas falling on, let's say, a Friday, which gives you a 3-day week. If Christmas falls on Friday, geez, man, you get Thursday, pretty much Christmas Eve, you don't have to do any work. And Christmas on Friday, gotta love that, because now you got a holiday, and then you got your regular Saturday, Sunday. Oh, that's cool. And then when Christmas falls on a Monday, you get that as well. So, but that kind of not cool because Christmas Eve is on Sunday.
Yeah.
It's better when Christmas falls on Friday because you kind of get most of the day on Thursday is Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
Then you get Friday is Christmas Day, and then you got your regular Saturday, Sunday weekend, so it extends it out. So, but that doesn't happen every year.
No.
Sometimes Christmas falls on a Wednesday or something like that, and so there you have it. So that year, 32 AD, the special Sabbath and the regular Sabbath were contiguous, meaning back to back to each other. That's why Jesus had to be crucified on a Thursday. And if he wasn't crucified on a Thursday, we don't have 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. So the Bible is exactly correct. Catholic tradition is exactly wrong. And Sunday we're going to, commemorate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Not Easter, but the resurrection of Jesus. Not Ishtar, but Jesus of Nazareth, God in human flesh. He entered into Jerusalem on a donkey on Palm Sunday, which was last week for us. And his crucifixion would have been today, between the hours of 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. His burial would have been before sundown. So when we started this Bible study, the sun was still up. It was low in the sky, but he would have been buried just before you guys got here for the Bible study tonight. So, and then he would be in the grave until before sunrise on Sunday, which we'll commemorate on Sunday as Resurrection Sunday. So with that, there you have it. We've gone through another. Any questions or comments, Ben?
I have a quick question, and maybe it's a question more for David Hunt, but if you can help me think it through. He pointed out as one of the many infallible proofs that the Passover has been celebrated continuously. And because of that fact, we know that all of it is true. So that what Exodus told us then has to be true, because there's no way that you could later on fool people into say, hey, let's celebrate as if we've been doing this for a long while. You get a whole nation to celebrate with you.
Sir.
There's one, if I understand that correctly, it wasn't actually continuously celebrated, because there were some generations when Israel kind of lost the book. And they had bad kings, and it took, I forget which one, but it took a good king to come back and to read the book out loud to them. And I think Passover was restarted. I would
say that probably doesn't jive with my understanding. Yeah. I think the Passover has been continuously celebrated, and it's probably the only religious holiday that's been continuously celebrated since the Egyptian captivity ended. So for goodness forbid, over 1,000 years, 1,500 years, I think the Passover has been celebrated somewhere. Just like the Word of God has always been somewhere in someone's heart, even after the fall in the Garden of Eden, and even after the flood of Noah. Somebody somewhere was celebrating because they remembered that they were supposed to do that. And I don't think God would have allowed the Passover to fall into disuse, because there would be one faithful man, because they always had prophets somewhere who was willing to die and willing to stand up against even the most wicked kings like Manasseh and those guys who were doing evil things. And so, I think the Passover has been celebrated somewhere in the land of Israel, whether the king was doing it or not. And it's the only religious holiday or holiday period that has been continuously celebrated annually for over 1,500 years. So Passover is a special thing. It's unfortunate the Jews don't fully see what it's about, but if you ever go to a Jewish Passover service, which I have a few times, you'll see it's amazingly obvious, all the symbolism. You take the soda, it's pierced with the cracker is pierced, and wrap it in linen cloth, and then break it, and then you hide it, and then the kids have to go and find it, and then when you find it, you get a prize, and it's amazing how the symbology of a modern Passover celebration ties directly into the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus in the gospel. So with that, then, okay, we're gonna end it right there, and that's our annual, Daniel's 69 weeks and how it ties into Palm Sunday and how it ties into the resurrection of Jesus Christ. We didn't have quite enough time to go into detail into Exodus chapter 12, but look at Exodus chapter 12, and that's going to lay out for you all of the requirements of the Passover lamb and how the Passover lamb had to be killed ritualistically and on Nisan 14. In fact, you have, real quickly, if Ben or Steve, you want to flip there real quick? We can just run through that real fast. And they go into some of this in detail.
12. Oh, wait.
Exodus 12, 1 through 3.
And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months.
Talking about Nisan, month of Nisan.
It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month,
Nisan 10.
they shall take to them every man a lamb according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house.
Genevieve, pick us up at verses 5 through 8.
Your lamb shall be without blemish.
Genevieve's got everything highlighted. Look at
I
that.
mean,
Look at that, man.
Yeah,
Oh.
I got mine too. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. Ye shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats, and ye shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month,
Nisan 14.
and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. And they shall take of the blood and strike it on the two sides post and on the upper door post and of the house.
That's what I've drawn right here, guys. There it is. Boom. Here it is. The two doorposts and on the lintel above it. Go ahead.
Wherein they shall eat it, and they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it.
Okay, Ben, pick us up verses 11 through 14.
And thus shall ye eat it, with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand. And you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. And against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord.
Steve, 17 and 18.
And ye shall observe the feast of unleavened bread. For in this selfsame day have I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore shall ye observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month,
Nisan 14 he's talking about.
ye shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the
So he's saying in the evening of the 14th day,
Mhm.
you're going to eat for 7 days after that till the 21st.
till the 21st day of the month.
So 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 21st days. Yeah, 7 days from 14 through the 21st. And 27, 21 to 27? Ben?
Then Moses called for all the elders of Israel, and said unto them, Draw out and take you a lamb according to your families, and kill the Passover. And ye shall take a bunch of hyssop, and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the two side posts with the blood that is in the basin. And none of you shall go out at the door of his house until the morning. For the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians. And when he seeth the blood upon the lintel and on the two side posts, the Lord will pass over the door, and will not suffer the destroyer to come in unto your houses to smite you. And he shall observe this thing for an ordinance to thee and to thy sons forever. And it shall come to pass, when ye be come to the land which the Lord will give you, according as he hath promised, that ye shall keep this service. And it shall come to pass, when your children shall say unto you, What mean ye by this service? That ye shall say, It is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, when he smote the Egyptians, and delivered our houses. And the people bowed the head and worshipped.
All right, so we can actually jump through, and I'm going to go ahead and try to finish this up, and we won't have to even finish up next. John. Let's jump in, Steve. John chapter 13, verses 1 and 2.
Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour was come, that he would depart out of this world unto the Father.
Stop right there. Now it was before the feast of the Passover. Jesus didn't have the Passover. It was before the Feast of the Passover Steve's talking about. Then what happens?
Having loved his own which were in the world, he loved them unto the end. And supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him.
So the Last Supper couldn't have been the Passover because Steve just told us it was before the Passover. Okay, Genevieve, pick us up John chapter 18, verses 1 through 3.
When Jesus had spoken these words, he went forth with his disciples over the brook Cedron, where was a garden into the which he entered and his disciples. And Judas also, which betrayed him, knew the place, for Jesus oftentimes resorted thither with his disciples. Judas then, having received a band of men and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, come thither with lanterns and torches and weapons.
Okay, so what Genevieve just read is right after what Steve read. They were in the upper room having the Last Supper before the Passover, and then they left the upper room and went to the Garden of Gethsemane where Judas came and betrayed him, where we pick up, Ben, in verse 28.
Then they led Jesus from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, and it was early. And they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover.
Okay, so what does that tell us then, boys and girls? Jesus was arrested. Remember we talked about it. He's arrested now. It's probably, between 3 and 6 a.m. He's arrested. And it's during the day of Nisan 14, even though it's still nighttime out. It's still dark out, but it's now the day Nisan 14. And they want to eat the Passover, which will begin the next day on Nisan 15. After sun rises and goes down on Nisan 14, the Passover begins. So when Jesus is arrested and put on trial, clearly the Passover hasn't happened yet. Because the reason why they were worried about getting defiled is because they hadn't had the Passover, which would be the meal that's coming up the next night. Okay, Ben, pick us up in verse 39.
But ye have a custom that I should release unto you at the Passover. Will ye therefore that I release unto you the King of the Jews?
See, Passover hasn't happened yet. In honor of the upcoming Passover, which will begin in a few hours, I'll let go of the King of the Jews, but they chose Barabbas instead. So now let's just jump real quick. So Jesus is not selected by the people. He's put to death. He's in the ground for 3 days and 3 nights, which we found out about in Matthew chapter 12, verse 40 of chapter 12. Now we flip over to Nisan 17, which is Sunday, and we'll pick up there, Steve, in chapter 20. Give us verses 1 through 9.
The first day of the week cometh Mary Magdalene early, when it was yet dark, unto the sepulchre, and seeth the stone taken away from the sepulchre. Then she runneth and cometh to Simon Peter, and to the other disciple whom Jesus loved, and saith unto them, They have taken away the Lord out of the sepulchre, and we know not where they have laid him. Peter therefore went forth, and the other disciple, and came to the sepulchre. So they ran both together, and the other disciple did outrun Peter, and came first to the sepulchre. And he, stooping down, and looking in, saw the linen clothes lying, yet went he not in. Then cometh Simon Peter following him, and went into the sepulchre, and seeth the linen clothes lie, and the napkin that was about the head, not laying with the linen clothes, but wrapped together in a place by itself. Then went in also that other disciple, which came first to the sepulchre, and he saw and believed. For as they knew not the scripture, that he must rise again from the dead.
Okay, and so there's our resurrection. Now I'm just going to jump forward and close this out with what Paul wrote to the Hebrews in Hebrews chapter 9. He says this, verse 11, But Christ came as high priest of the good things to come, with the greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is, of this creation. Not with the blood of goats and calves, which we've been talking about with the temple system, but with his own blood, he, Jesus, entered the most holy place once for all. His blood goes into the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle in heaven. With his own blood, he entered the most holy place once for all time. Catholics re-crucify Jesus every Sunday. He was only crucified once on Nisan 14 of 32 AD. With his own blood, one time, he entered the most holy place once for all, having obtained eternal redemption. Verse 15 says, and for this reason, he is the mediator of the new covenant by means of death for the redemption of the transgressions under the first covenant, that those who are called may receive the promise of an eternal inheritance. For where there is a testament, Paul, ever the lawyer, talking about, wills and trust law, for where there is a testament, there must also of necessity be the death of the testator. And that's true, right? In property class, when I was in law school, the professor would say, you don't have heirs until you die. He was like, well, my heirs would inherit the house. And I was like, no, son, you're still alive. You don't have heirs until you die. I'm like, oh, okay. So you don't inherit anything until the death of the testator. And so Paul says that for a testament is enforced after men are dead, since it has no power at all while the testator lives. And Paul is making a very powerful statement there about Jesus. If he hadn't died, he could be the nicest guy in the world. But if he didn't die, none of us can inherit the will of eternal life. I will to you, Steve, the power of a never-ending life, signed Jesus of Nazareth. But if he never dies, you can't inherit it, and God's not going to honor it. And so he says, verse 22, and according to the law, almost all things are purged with blood. For without the shedding of blood, there is no remission. And he's, of course, talking about of sin. So there you have it. Jesus had to die on the cross on Nisan 14 for us to be able to get into the Father's house in heaven on the day of the rapture, which I think, boys and girls, is coming sooner than you think. So with that, Steve, go ahead and close us out in prayer. And hopefully this is our last Resurrection Sunday annual Palm Sunday, 69 weeks of Daniel teaching on this prophecy topic. And the next time you hear me talking about it will be at the Father's house in heaven. So, amen. Could this be the last year that we do this? I hope so. Not that I don't enjoy meeting with you here, but I'd rather meet with you at the Father's house in heaven.
For sure. Lord God, we thank you again for this little house church, Lord, for another chance for us to be able to go through the process, Lord, to just watching the steps unfold of the greatest gift. I mean, really just, the creation was as amazing as it was, Lord, but you becoming a man, walking the earth, suffering the wrath of the Father in our place. Lord, there's nothing more. I mean, we can't ask for anything more, Lord. Otherwise, we're paying for our own sins. Lord, none of us want to be that. I hope that, Lord, that we understand that and carry that out and sharing the gospel with others so that, we have that same understanding of, as Paul wrote before, because we know the terror of the Lord, that we persuade men. So, Lord, I pray that we leave here tonight with that understanding and go out and share that gospel with those that need to hear it. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, so somebody hit the stop button, and we're back up and running. We'll put that in the can.